Someone asked me recently, excuse me, if I could more properly define what it is I think about certain subjects. Originally, this was actually going to be part of another video, and was in fact designed to be part of that video. I hate to tease you like that, but that video is not ready to be done. So, instead I give you this. Once upon a time, interactive media became a thing. Now, it's always been a thing to some extent or another, usually a small extent, but when the term video game started being thrown around as the kind of game you play on a video, it was a different kind of medium. I mean, yes, we'd always had things we could do in the past, but the potential of the video game allowed us to do so much more while still retaining that interactive element. In my personal opinion, this is one of the reasons that video games are such a huge thing, and will remain so, probably forever, basically, at this point, now that the dam is opened. And the simple reason is, there are so many people, like myself, who prefer to do rather than to watch or to read. Now let me make something clear right off the bat here. I am not trying to call anyone who prefers reading or watching or, viewing artwork or whatever, anything more quote-unquote passive rather than active. I am not trying to say anything negative about you whatsoever. Let's make that absolutely clear, okay? What I am trying to say is that certain people, like myself, prefer interactive entertainment. Whether that be actually going out and playing basketball or hockey or whatever myself, or sitting down and playing a video game, or, there's about a dozen other examples I could give, but you get the point. Because we're here to talk about video games. See, the other interesting thing I find about it is how video game has become a term like book, or like television show, And what I mean by that is the game is, the term is so pointless almost. It's a broad categorization that is so broad in its scope and depth that it is effectively meaningless for all intents and purposes except as an absolute qualifier. And again, that's why I use the examples like book or television show. Saying something is a book tells you that you probably read it. But that's about all the information that's conveyed there, There are so many different varieties and types and styles and so forth and so on, and it's the same thing with video games. It's a phenomenon to me that, yeah, the term video game can simultaneously describe a game where I jump to the right, dodging puzzles and a platformer kind of a situation, a game where I sit back and hit the right buttons at the right time, a game where I am trying to learn and grow more about myself and about what's around me, a game where there's character development and there's this deep, interesting story that I desperately want to know more about, and so forth and so on. I could keep going on for a very long time. All of that is combined within that same category. Now, I'm not trying to sound all here, because that's not really the point. The point is not that the term is inadequate. The point, well, I guess that is the point. But it's not, I'm not trying to sound superior here. I'm not trying to sound artsy. I'm not trying to sound anything like that. The point I am trying to emphasize is how amazing that is. That's what I really want to get across. How awesome it is that we have so many things now that are video games, that we have access to these things, that we have the capacity to have these things, that we have the probability of saying, well, I want to play blah, and basically whatever it is, there's probably at least one thing there. This has become even more true in the last 2 years as the quote-unquote indie market has exploded. I personally don't like using the term indie because I usually use that as a negative. Again, the whole artsy-fartsy thing. But to put it bluntly, the term indie as far as video games, I almost wish I had a different term, like independent developer. Yes, I know that is actually what indie stands for. But I say it differently to get across the point that it's just someone who has less budget, less time, doesn't have the colossal, power behind them in order to make a quote-unquote AAA game or even a midway game, but instead can make something that they just want to make, or that they want to get out there, or they want to get their name noticed. There's a dozen reasons to do it. It's also fascinating to me that video games also run the gamut, just like everything does, of I'm making this just for the money. I'm making this just for the money, but I'd like to do a good job. I don't care about this product. I really want this to be done and over with. Um, and of course, the rare and wonderful exceptions, which are we truly care about making a phenomenal game here. We want to leave an impact here. Whether it's because they want to really care about it for the sake of us, the gamers, or maybe it's because they really want to get their name out there and noticed on this phenomenal game. Whatever the reasoning is, they care. I like to point to Black Isle as a good example of a game developer that, for whatever their reasons were, because obviously they're still in it to make money. Don't mistake me. I'm not trying to say that there's some perfect, wonderful world where, they just make games to make games. That'd be great. I'll be honest. I'd love that thing. I've spoken about this topic before, and I don't want to go over it in too much detail. But I think that would be awesome. However, there are still people who honestly and genuinely care. And I hate to use old examples because it sounds like I'm going into the nostalgia trip, but there are developers nowadays who do the same exact thing. They care. Doesn't matter why. Maybe it's because they really care about the game. Maybe it's because they really have a degree of professionalism. Maybe it's because they really want to make sure this is successful. And it is worth noting that a lot of developers have repeatedly come across the realization that if they really put their time and effort and put their best foot forward into a game, there's a good chance that they will profit from it. That you don't have to smash out a cheap, you don't have to smash out a Call of Duty clone. I'm just going to say it. You don't have to smash out a Call of Duty clone to make money. That's the thing that also kind of bothers me about this, if you'll forgive me for segueing for just a moment. So often we assume that the people who smash out those Call of Duty clones and the other games like that, with that mentality here, here, get it out, get it sold, get it out, get it sold, the factory line method is done for the sake of making money. And while it certainly is, and while it certainly does, it is worth noting that the people who make games really to make an awesome game and that game endures also make plenty of money. This is historically, factually proven. Not 100% of the time. Not 100% of the time, but many, many of the times, when you put forth your effort to make a phenomenal game, you will profit from it. End of segue. Excuse me. So, the other thing I really want to mention, though, is why it is that the interactive part of it is what really fascinates me. Because if you put Final Fantasy VI into a movie, or more accurately a television show, that'd be a really long movie, I'd probably enjoy it. But would it be something that really hits me? Would it be something that really touches me, that actually makes me feel? Probably not. And the reason why is because I was there. You know what I mean? I've talked about this concept before, and forgive me for discussing this, but okay. Let's make this distinction extremely clear. Final Fantasy VI is a game, a video game. A fictional universe doesn't actually exist. However, the problem most people have is when they make this argument about whether something like that matters or not. It's just a game, it's just a book, it's just a whatever. They always stop the argument there. They never continue thinking about it. They never continue actually taking that to its logical conclusion, which is, I, a real person, actually have been interacted with on this level. I have done, I have shared, I have grown, I have done this. These are real memories that I actually put forth and made happen. Just because it isn't real doesn't mean what I feel about it isn't real. You follow? You could make the argument that FF6 isn't real and therefore I shouldn't care about it. That would be, in my frank opinion, wrong. Because like I said, you're just completely skipping over a step. The fact that it's real or not doesn't matter. What matters is whether or not what I feel about it, whether what I think about it is real, and it is. You follow? And so that now stated, and I know I've talked about this before, forgive me. I'm going to talk about it again in my Voyager videos, because there's an episode I want to talk about that with. I fought off Kefka at Narsh. I helped get them back to Nikia from the Veld. I made sure the opera was a success, I saved Cyan from his own doubt and fears, and Rexol. I could go on and on and on and on. I did those things. You understand? I didn't just watch these characters go through it, which certainly would have been interesting and engaging, and probably would have actually, stirred something in me. But I did that. I put forth the effort to go out and make that happen. I know a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. Mass Effect. I'll just use that as the example. How many people out there were so injured by Mass Effect 3 because we did it? We stepped out and saved that galaxy, brought those people together, made those lives better or worse or whatever choices we made. We did it. We did. And they took that from us. And that's why we cared so much. And that, in a nutshell, is why interactive media is here to stay, why it is such a huge thing for me. Let's go ahead and cut that topic off and start a new one. Someone recently asked me to look at a movie that I hated, to ruminate about a movie I hated. Oh shoot, what was the movie? The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, I don't like horror. I've said this a billion times. I'm not into that sort of thing. Not into horror, not into gore. Not my thing. But she really wanted me to. Now, the thing that really caught me about this was her reasons why, because I went to her and I'm like, look, I don't want to do this. And she was like, why don't you want to do this? And I said very simply, when I do a rumination, when I sit here and talk about a game, Chrono Trigger, I like to keep going back to that one as my best example, because it wasn't enough to say Chrono Trigger was awesome. I wanted to talk about why it was awesome. I wanted to discuss why it was the way it was, and really, really pull it out, really analyze it. I mean, whenever I finally get around to actually doing my Chrono Trigger lore run, I'm going to be talking about that game like non-stop. Because I want to really delve into the why with enthusiasm. When you ask me to look at a game or a movie or a book or whatever that I don't like, I can't muster that same enthusiasm because I don't like it, But that wasn't her point. And this is what really struck me, because this had never occurred to me until she said it to my face. She said to me, well, she said my name, but, Arsha and Gaia, you have the ability to differentiate between something you like and something that is good. And I want your analysis on this movie because I love this movie, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. And we got into this big discussion about this, and it was fascinating to talk about because I realized she was right, as weird as that sounds. It almost sounds egotistical to admit it, but I've said this before. My favorite example I like to use of this is Elvis, okay? I can't stand Elvis. I hate his music. It actually bothers me to listen to his music. However, I will never, ever try to detract the man for his talent or his contributions to music. He did a great many things and was extremely good at what he did, right? Now, I'm not saying I'm unique in this. I know plenty of people who can differentiate between that. It's like a diagram thing here, if you will. We've got enjoyed, didn't enjoy, good, and bad. And there's these 4 categories here, right? And, well, really, I don't even have to say anything else with it. Just because something is good doesn't mean you enjoy it. Just because something is bad doesn't mean you don't. There's the category here. Let me segue just a little bit to really make this point clear. There's a movie called Commando, which Arnold Schwarzenegger is in. Now, those of you out there who've actually seen that movie, I'll wait till you finish rolling your eyes. And the rest of you, I'll wait until you finish going and Wikipediaing it. It's a bad movie. But I like watching it. I admit it. Go ahead. Flame me. I don't mind. I like watching Commando. I think it's entertaining. There's plenty of things like that, whether it's so bad it's good or just because it's so wonderfully cheesy or whatever. We all have that. We all have that. Let me give you another example. This is actually an even better one in my opinion. There's a video game on the GameCube called F-Zero GX. Now this is a weird example because that's actually probably one of my favorite racing games of all time. It's at least in like the top 10 somewhere. It's a really fun game to play. Do yourself a favor, or perhaps don't, go YouTube F-Zero GX cutscenes, or story mode cutscenes, or something like that. They are so apocalyptically, hilariously bad, but I still enjoy them. And it's really hard to explain why. They are so bad. They are so over-the-top terrible that I still actually find myself enjoying them. It's a very unique thing, and I could talk about the so good it's bad topic in a whole video by itself. So I'm not going to get too far into that. My point here is if you asked me now, say, because that's something I enjoy, right? Let me take out a movie. We'll use a movie as an example. Something I don't enjoy. Battlefield Earth. Now that is a bad movie. I'm sorry. There's basically no arguing that point. Whether you enjoy it or not, that's totally up to you. I hate that movie. I actually had to sit through that movie a couple times for various reasons. We're not going to get into it. Long story short, the more I learned about that movie, the worse it got. That's the kind of thing I would like to avoid in general. But let's use an example of the other thing, and let's finally bring my point home here. There's a game called BioShock. Now, some of you out there probably know I already did a video about this, and I already stated in the video pretty honestly and flatly, I didn't enjoy BioShock. Not my thing, you know? But I still did a video about it. That was intended to be an exception because it was so widely requested. It was so asked for. It was literally the most asked for video I'd done, second only to The Witcher, actually. And so I was like, okay, because I actually played BioShock. So I sat down and I said, all right, let's really think about this. Let's really look at this. And I did it, and I tried to really talk about why I felt it was a good game. Because let's make this clear. I think BioShock is a great game. I just didn't enjoy it. And that's exactly what the woman who I almost said her name, I try to keep names off this show, that's why she wanted me to look at The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing. It was also partially because well, let's just not go into it. She just found out about the remake, or I'm sorry, the prequel, I guess, and she wanted me to look at that and explain to her in my own terms why The Thing was a great movie. By the way, I do actually genuinely think The Thing, John Carpenter's Thing, was a phenomenal movie. I just didn't enjoy it. Whereas the new thing just kind of fell short, you know. And she wanted me to outline it because she says she thinks about that sort of thing better when I lay it out. And I've gotten that comment before, so sure, fine. And I went ahead and did a rumination for her, just one to one, about the thing. And as I was doing it, it occurred to me that it wasn't as hard to do as I would think it would be. And even though I lacked the enthusiasm, there was no sign of that, if that makes any sense. There was no hint of, oh, this is terrible, and this was good, I guess. I was worried that I would be derogatory, that I would be detracting from the work. But I wasn't. And quite the contrary, I was basically exulting on how incredible of a job they did. The only real nitpick I had was the false shadow foreshadowing, no pun intended, early on in the movie. And we all know that was just a production error, or not a production error, it was a change in script or something like that. So, not a big deal, right? Otherwise, a really, really, really well done movie. And I got to thinking about that, and I started to realize why it is I started doing this to begin with. This whole show. Did you know that it has been over 3 years at this point, I believe? August 29th, I think, is the date. I actually wrote it down in case it was ever relevant, because I do stuff like that. August 29th, I believe 2010. It could have been 2011. I don't actually remember. That's how long I've been doing these videos. And I really got into this because I really wanted to encourage two things. This is it right here in a nutshell. I know. I'm sorry. I've been babbling on for however long. I don't even have my monitor on, so I can't tell how long. Two reasons why I do these videos. Reason one, I want you to think. I want to engage your brain. I want to point out things that occur to me and my interpretation of those things so that you also can think about them. You don't have to agree with me. In fact, that's not even on the table. I don't care if you agree with me. I care if you're thinking about it. I care what you're pulling from it, and whether you're interpreting things differently, interpreting things in the same way. Maybe you agree with me on this point or not. Maybe it's because you enjoy it because of this completely other thing that I didn't even occur to, or didn't even occur to me. Whatever. I want you to think about it. I want you to understand why it is you feel the way you feel, whatever that is. And two, to share my joy in this whole concept with other people. To exult, to share in something that brings me happiness in my life, and say, here, probably the penultimate example of that I would think would be the Half-Life 2 video I did, where I was just screaming my I keep using that word, my energy, my enthusiasm, my joy that game brought me. It was incredible, and I wanted to share that with you. I wanted to. You understand? I really did. I wanted you to think about it, and I wanted to share that joy. That's why I do these videos. So, I guess ultimately, let's go and put my monitor back on, make sure I'm doing all right here. It'd be hilarious if this wasn't recording this whole time. Okay, it's recording. That would be terrible. Ultimately, if I were to summarize everything I'm talking about, and I've been talking about for the last 20 minutes now, I know, kind of a short video, but I really wanted to make this point because this is really important to me. Everything about the first topic, everything about the second topic. Video games are awesome. Let's discuss.